December. That happy time of year, when good cheer was all around, when children played in the snow and parents were trapped during the rush, when trees were wrapped in tinsel and ribbon, when presents are wrapped ready for gifting. Christmas time was here. It came around again, and it only reminded you of what your life was. Staring out the window of your room, you watched light snow drift softly in the air. It was only a bit of frost at this time. The heavy snow had yet to rear its head. Your eyes glanced around your room, finding that over the years it had begun to feel more like home to you. Despite the exposed ceiling of the decrepit warehouse that the front had situated their base on, it was all exposed brick and industrial infrastructure. You made do with what you had available. At least you had a nice bed and a roof over your head. Dabi made sure of that. You eyed your bedside table, spotting a few small items you had as keepsakes. One in particular being a small ceramic piece. It was the only thing of Christmas you had left. Walking around your room was a bit tiresome, since the front was invaded by intruders weeks ago. You were recuperating from the intense heat you submerged into from Dabi's flames. Your body had very little energy to run on, and exhaustion was a side effect you couldn't shake off. Making your way to your bed, you haphazardly laid on top of its soft mattress, pulling yourself across it as a means to reach your bedside table on the opposite side. You reached out for the ceramic piece, your fingers merely touching its surface, but not extended enough to grab hold of it. Through your exhaustion and the unwillingness to move from the comfort of your bed, you gave up, leaving yourself staring at the exposed ceiling for some time. Every year, you felt nostalgic. Christmas was a special time, but after the Christmas fires, it held more meaning to you, conflicting as it was. You still loved this time of year, yet it broke your heart. Maybe it was the decorations, the events, the way you would continue to give your time away to make things better in any way possible. Maybe you missed being needed. The bed bowed a little from the weight of another, whose hands landed beside your head, his eyes staring down at you, upside down from your point of view.
"What are you doing?"
asked Dabi languidly while he eyed your tired look. "Nothing," you replied, frank about your response. "Literally." You stared into his blue eyes, captivated by how bright they were despite him having walked out from the shower while his hair drooped heavily, still damp. You couldn't help but trail your eyes along his chest, his scars visible for you to see. Over the years he had slowly grown to trust you enough to see his scars, where the burns had marred his body. It made you wonder about your arms, nowhere near as scorned as his, but they were a reminder just as much as his scars were to him. You reached your hand up towards his face, comparing the scars between yours and his. His blue eyes only matched the blue fissures that decorated your arms, a side effect of that salve you applied years ago. "You know, you could have knocked," you commented before Dabi's hand reached up for yours.
"You left the door open,"
he remarked.
"That's called an invitation."
"I thought you would have had manners," you teased lightly. "Although that hasn't stopped you either." A low hum from Dabi was his only response. True, over the years after telling you the truth, it had been difficult. Learning of him being a villain was one thing, but to accept the fact about your turn of events in your life was entirely devastating. Dabi had watched as you reluctantly listened to Shigaraki's ramblings, or tried to befriend Toga. However, that little spark of light that you had in your previous life seemed to have disappeared. Dabi couldn't shake the fact of being responsible for snuffing out something that once was. It hit home.
Come on, Pipsqueak.
He spoke, still with his hand grasping on yours while he pulled you up from the bed.
Shigaraki wants a debrief.
What? Again?
You questioned, confused, while Dabi pulled you to your feet.
We already told him everything.
Yeah, well, that pixie of his woke up. Finally.
Explained Dabi, his lips curled in a tiny sneer at the mention of it.
He wants a full rundown.
You mumbled under your breath, more so from your exhaustion rather than your annoyance. Standing on your feet, you lazily followed Dabi out from your room, watching as he entered into his to loosely grab a black shirt that laid on his bed. You peered into his room, slightly haphazard with items, but simple, just like yours. Being with the front had its upsides, but you wished you could bring some cheer into your room. It felt out of place to do so. Eventually, the both of you made your way through the front's headquarters towards the meeting room, which in itself was just one large room, the only chair present belonging to Shigaraki. There were even placements for where people stood around Shigaraki. Now, being the head of tactics, you always stood next to Dabi, always working hand in hand on whatever was asked. Yet, years after the war, it had been quiet, except for the occasional incident now and then involving former Liberation Front bases being destroyed. Until more information was learnt or retrieved, you hung low until needed. You spotted Dabi walk lazily towards the meeting room before he passed the doctor on the way. Your eyes perked up at her while she turned a glance towards Dabi with a smile. For a brief moment, you spotted something communicated between the two, the way they locked eyes for a moment before she turned her attention onto you.
How are you today?
She asked with a warm smile.
Oh, I'm a little tired.
You replied.
Have you not recouped enough? I'm not sure. Maybe I pushed myself a little too much than usual. Well, at least you're on your feet,
she remarked, inspecting your arms.
May I?
You turned towards Dabi, finding that he had stopped in the hallways, waiting, his hands in the pockets of his pants while he leaned against the exposed brick of the hallway. You lifted your arms, allowing the doctor to take a gentle hold on them while pressing on a few pressure points. Aside from the tightness of the scarred skin, your arms no longer felt any pain whenever a checkup was required. The blue salve did its job. But after the fact, you learned how it had manifested and, in a way, mutated your quirk. The doctor smiled while she eyed the blue fissures along your arm.
They've improved a little. How are you feeling about how they look?
She asked.
They are what they are,
you replied, earning an intrigued look on the doctor's brow.
I can't turn back time.
Sadly, no, she responded as she released you from her gentle hold. But
You either accepting or denying them means a great deal to me. I want to be sure that you are genuinely okay.
You turned your gaze up to hers, noticing the concerned look in her eyes. For years the doctor had been supportive of your healing process, but it was complicated. The woman who brought you back to life was also the woman who stole your quirk. It took a while to understand the scientific implications behind it, but it was a gradual ease into this new life and this new quirk.
You've asked for years,
you commented.
I'm just a little exhausted.
Of course, please take care. We may be needing to have another checkup after this holiday passes. You smiled softly yet sadly at the thought before the doctor walked away, heading towards wherever she may be required. You spotted Dabi still leaning by the wall before he pushed himself off to continue the trek down the hallway. After a while following him, you noticed that the both of you had walked past the meeting room, heading towards the front doors of the headquarters instead. You had to double take from the confusion that settled in your head.
Wait, Dabi, aren't we supposed to be—
Not right now.
He interrupted.
I want to show you something.
Dabi bursted through the front doors with you following suit, walking out into the lightly dusted snowfall. After the war, the front had moved bases from Deka City to somewhere within Musatafu, hiding in plain sight as most people would put it. You could spot the city's horizon ahead, while Dabi and yourself walked through the frost, noticing that the daylight would soon turn into its twilight hours. The snow continued to drift softly in the air, but not enough to save a snowflake before it reached the ground. Perks of being on the outskirts of Musatafu, you thought. The crunch of the frost ceased when you spotted Dabi stop before you, turning to face you with his hand outstretched, inviting you in. You took his hand while he pulled you in, holding you in his embrace before he started to move, swaying in the snow. He twirled around slowly, leading you into a simple waltz based on his timing. You followed his lead, step by step, a little wary about where he was leading, but enough to not step on his feet. With every sway in this slow dance, you watched as his hair slowly became engulfed by the frost, almost as if a halo of white decorated his crown. Still, as pleasant as this felt, you eyed his intentions.
I didn't know you could dance.
You spoke, confused.
You assumed I couldn't.
He corrected.
I just never showed you.
If you wouldn't mind me asking, how did you learn?
Dabi peered at you with his lazy eyes, yet his bright blues still struck you sharply with how they twinkled. There was something there, almost nostalgic. You could relate.
I took lessons.
He simply replied.
I still remember.
It wasn't a complete answer, but a smile tugged at your lips. Dabi was still very secretive about himself, only ever speaking about the now and never dwindling about his past. It was something you grew to understand despite your anger and spite towards him during your healing process. You had learned a lot more about yourself, growing from the anger to a degree, but also enough to find the lines safest to speak to Dabi about his life.
Whoever taught you should give me lessons,
you joked, still a bit hesitant in your step.
I'm afraid I'd step on your toes.
That's the least of your concerns.
Dabi whispered while he held you close, swaying with you still while the snow continued to pour from above. You took him in, feeling the freshly pressed shirt against your cheek and the smell of his body wash. Even living in a run-down place, he still kept to a standard. It was funny.
I don't want you to regret meeting me.
Dabi whispered in your ear.
Because I don't regret finding you.
There were moments Dabi showed affection, although minute and in secret from the rest of the front members. You never asked for anything to be made public. Far from that, but Dabi's influence in your life, this new life, was definitely painted with its ups and downs. He had made himself public years ago, masquerading his distaste for hero society upon the screens that littered the city. However, he still made his more personal moments, his personal piece of history, under wraps. You turned to gaze upon Dabi, spotting his hair now completely frosted in white. You tugged a small smile upon the sight, seeing his blue eyes twinkle in this look.
"White suits you,"
you commented. Suddenly, a flare of his blue flames roared from his body, immediately melting the snow that piled on his hair and his shoulders, and inadvertently melting a small circumference of the snow around the both of you. As soon as the light of his flames ignited, your arms glimmered a shimmering blue from the fissures that decorated your burn scars, absorbing a part of his flames into them, leaving you unscathed until they pulsated. A fiery blue sphere bloomed from your person, the bubble ballooning outwards, keeping an umbrella of the blue flame and light above your heads. You watched the snow hit its surface, fizzling and burning away while the both of you stood in a snowless circle. You stared at your arms, noticing the blue fluorescent light that decorated them dissipate, returned back to the blue fissures that faintly painted your skin. You breathed deeply, feeling a slight wave of exhaustion hit you before you felt Dabi's arms wrap around your frame, his eyes still on you.
This is who I am now,
he commented.
I'm no longer that person.
"I guess that's what we have in common,"
you gestured while you took his hand again, resting your other on his shoulder.
"We're no longer who we were."
Don't be so gloomy,
he softly reprimanded before you felt his hand tighten around yours, fueled with intention.
That's what I'm known for, little dancer.
In a swoop, Dabi began to take larger strides within the firewall, spinning you around and keeping you on your toes. You were taken by surprise by his sudden approach, only to start smiling again from the momentum. Despite the secrets, you found a kindred spirit in Dabi. A man who suffered to be given a new lease on life. Just like you. Dabi held you close again, his lips upon your neck while he tightened his arms around you. He sounded out of breath, but while you pressed your cheek into the crook of his neck and the warmth of his chest, you had figured in the back of your mind that he had spun one too many times for him to keep his balance.
"I don't regret meeting you,"
you whispered back, out of breath.
"I don't regret patching you up that night. I don't regret the hardest 2 years of my life, because I got to learn more about the world outside, and I got to learn more about you."
You felt his hands grip into your body, as if he could lose you at any given moment. You've never felt this much emotion from Dabi before, until something viscous and thick dripped onto your shoulder. Dabi stared at the ground, feeling the blood from his scars bleed onto you. He made a mental note to get you new clothes should his blood tears refuse to wash away. There were very few and rare moments that he would allow this kind of emotion to swallow him whole, but out in the open alone, he allowed it to seep through. You turned to place your lips on his neck, still in his tight embrace, before the wall you put up began to fizzle away, allowing the snow to come falling onto your bodies again. The chill of the air breathed against your skin while the warmth of Dabi's body engulfed it. Two extremes side by side. The both of you had led your lives this way, leading the charge. It was one of many Christmases to follow, slowly growing and nurturing. You hoped one day Dabi would enjoy the snow just as much as you loved Christmas. Thank you for tuning in to another fanfiction reading. If you enjoy this content or would just prefer to fall asleep to my voice, please ring the bell, hit that like button, and subscribe to my channel. I hope you have a lovely Christmas holiday and a happy new year to follow. Thank you for visiting. I hope to hear back from you soon, next time we meet.